Clorinde's biggest pros and cons. That's what I'm here to tell you today. My name is Juice, and let's get into it. Clorox Bleach's best team will be Aggravate, so obviously that means she'll be working with Dendro, and following the common trend that all Dendro-based units do, she'll be good at lower investment compared to other DPSs. So why do I say this? Well, let's assume her in what her best in slot team may potentially be: Clorinde, Fischl, Nahida, Kazuha. As we know, Keqing Yae Miko are working overtime as Fischl drivers. Now imagine you put Thundering Fury on Clorinde. Can you see where this is going? You can do 2 Clorinde rotations in very quick succession with this set, since Aggravate supports have such fast animations. You can do your first rotation, refresh Nahida's E, do Fischl's E or Q, then Kazuha's E, then immediately go back to Clorinde. With this, you get a lot more aggravates per second, or APS, as you can fire off way more elemental reactions with this crazy uptime. This leads to higher Fischl damage as you proc her E4 a lot more often. This will not only net you higher DPS, but also make it easier to one-rotate bosses at lower artifact investments. TLDR, she's gonna be the most effective Fischl slave to date. I mean, hey, what did she expect? It's on her for deciding to be an Aggravate carry. This means for free-to-plays, Clorinde will be highly viable, and it isn't just Clorinde herself who can get away with being cheap, but her teammates as well. Nahida is not a hard character to build, just dump triple EM on her to max out her buffing potential, or if you want her to deal some spread damage, you can build her as a hybrid, but you really won't be going wrong either way. Kazuya, just slap a bunch of EM and ER on him, and you'll be good to go. Do know that the better your Fischl is, the better this team will perform for you, as she is the main cog in this machine. Plus, not only that, but her Aggravate team will be best in slot anywhere. Single target? Yep. AoE? Yep. Multi-wave? Yep. Especially nice considering Fischl is able to reposition herself. It's a team that's good and reusable in many scenarios, making it a super valuable team for newer players who don't have a lot of characters yet. Another really good part about this comp is that it has all this strength and all these positive qualities while not using a Hydro unit. Almost every good team in this game uses a Hydro unit of some kind, and it's immediate advice for new players to get 2 good Hydro units, such as Xingqiu, Yelan, Farina, and Noivellette, maybe even Kokomi if she suits your needs, as soon as they can. This is because Hydro is the best element in the game, and fits in almost every single team scenario. It improves any comp it sits in. Except here. Clorinde is Hydro free, meaning that if you only have Xingqiu, or need both your Hydros for the other half, well, Clorox Bleach is here to save the day. Performing this well without one is a big plus in terms of account value, and I consider this to be a free-to-play friendly move. And on top of all this, it's not even hard to access all this damage out of her. Clorinde is rather easy to pilot. A lot of the time, when it comes to a top-tier DPS unit, there will be some kind of skill barrier to accessing all of her damage, barring Noivellette because that guy just dramatically screams "settle down" when everyone settles down. Complex techniques being something like a double swirl. For example, Arlecchino wants it, Linny wants complex techniques in gameplay, Hu Tao wants double swirl in VV Vape. The only major difficulty swirling in Clorinde teams, barely any. Your only real goal will be to actually have an Electro Aura on the enemy while swirling, seeing as Nahida eats Electro Auras for breakfast. This does unfortunately come at the cost of having a low skill ceiling, which might turn some people off, but on the whole, if you're looking for a character that isn't overly difficult to use, then Clorinde might be the right one for you. Not to mention that the team itself is also super user-friendly. Clorinde heals herself quite consistently too, so unlike other Aggravate teams such as Keqing's, where you have to bust out iframe after iframe to keep yourself alive, or become a dodging expert, or Yae who'll get knocked out right here, right now, come on now. You can clear much more comfortably without using a sustain in the team. You can also abuse this for more team damage overall by using Nahida on sack frags or Widzif instead of prototype Amber, as some might opt to do. If you're having issues clearing without dying, there's never any shame in using Baiji or Karara. Aggravate is nice since it's one of the few Dendro teams where Nahida is not an absolute must. Kazuha's grouping is great in AoE, well, of course you would have guessed, and Nahida's marks are super easy to apply over and over in multi-wave. Not to mention that long burst of hers that will be able to buff many quick Thundering Fury based rotations. Awesome. Not to mention that in not needing a sustainer of Clorinde in general, you can opt for a more offensive pick in your main teams, such as Yelan for example. You can also replace aspects of her team if you need, making her comp very easy to modify depending on what you wish to achieve with Clorinde. For example, you need Fischl for your other half? That's fine. Yae works there too, albeit, just note, with longer field times and perhaps a more awkward rotation. Also, you lose Thundering Fury's value if you go this route. You can't survive with Nahida? No problem, go for Baiju, who's extremely comfortable healing and while buffing for Dendro-related teams, including Aggravate. And for free-to-plays who may not have pulled for the Doctor, Karara is here. Or let's just say you're a player who has money to spend. You want an expensive Clorinde, and the idea of her just being official driver sounds very unappealing. Well, fret not, because you can even consider using characters like Yunjin over official. Is high enough to justify choosing to prioritize her own damage over driving official A4s. This would be a technique for those who want to play Clorinde as a cold hard hyper carry. For example, if you have damage to one rotate a boss with hyper Clorinde, that's when you would go for that. Otherwise, Aggravate is best in slot in all scenarios, and will beat Clorinde hyper unless you have that dolphin to whale level investment on her. I suggested in the first place since I know there's a ton of you down bad Clorox simps out there who can't wait to pull for her weapons and cons, go and point yourselves out in the comments. While Aggravate will always be your uncontested best in slot, it is worth mentioning that all these teams exist and are viable, therefore making her flexible in scenarios where you can't afford to use a certain teammate with her. There is always a substitute. Heck, even Kazuha can be substituted for the free Lynette, who actually doesn't do too badly within Aggravate teams. There's also one more team worth mentioning, that being Overload. I will warn you that when I say Overload clears, I mean it clears in like 1 minute and 30 seconds. Possibly less, but it depends on your investment level. It's nowhere near being Clorinde's best in slot team, but you can 36-star with it, and it does free up plenty of teammates for your other side, being a very cost-efficient team. The price you pay is in not having a fast clear time, but since this team is capable of clearing, I felt like it was worth mentioning. This point is a small bonus pro. Clorinde's E can lunge her forward to enemies that are further away from her, meaning that she can go forward across the Abyss stage without having to consume stamina. I think that's pretty neat. Yulan can also do the same thing with her skill, and I feel like people sleep on this a bit. I get that it's not a huge deal, but it's nice quality of life that is really felt when you're actually in this scenario. Don't take your fast travel for granted. And now for cons. It is unfortunately a con that Keqing exists. Let's say your goal is simply to 36-star the Abyss. Well, Keqing Aggravate is more than capable of doing that for you. No, not in a 1 minute 30 seconds way. The team is actually solid. Keqing is mostly a pure official driver, since her strength lies in how much electro application she has to constantly proc official A4s. I will say that Clorinde does have all the pros I've mentioned, and at the end of the day, outdamages Keqing. Her damage matters a lot more than Keqing's, but if you already have a Keq W, I seriously cannot recommend choosing Clorinde for anything other than simp reasons. Account value wise, if you already have her, what incentive do you have to pull for a unit who operates in the same teams? And if you already have Yae Miko, I would also advise against pulling for Clorinde. You already have a good Aggravate 5-star. Yae isn't bad enough to justify having a pull for an upgrade. She's quite good in fact, making Clorinde an even more difficult pull to recommend. Now, if you don't have either of these characters, or you simply refuse to build Keqing out of 50-50 spite, then yes, Clorinde will be your best bet for an Aggravate DPS. But I think she's more worth getting if you're someone who's just getting into the game and wants an Aggravate pick, as opposed to being a pickup for people who have played for a long time and already have a good Aggravate option. The competition for her is tough, unfortunately. And sadly, since Clorinde relies so much on flat damage, hypercarry buffers like Chevreuse and Sara aren't that effective unless you have some outside source of flat damage. Why does she rely on flat damage? Well, her multipliers are low, and multipliers are the very first thing included in Genshin's damage formula. Everything is based on a character's multipliers. So if your multipliers are low, stat buffs will simply make that low number into a medium number, and flat damage is calculated more like multipliers are in the formula, therefore increasing her damage the most because it also makes every other stat better as it increases her flat damage as well, excluding attack. So Chevreuse and Sara's buffs are kind of whatever for Clorinde. Her kit isn't all about dealing the highest numbers, it's about proccing aggros constantly. Like I said before, the only instance where these buffs are worth considering is if you're a whale, Clorinde player, and her potential far exceeds what your official could ever do. Another problem with Clorinde is that she's not field flexible. When Clorinde uses her E, she has to stay on field the whole time, unlike Keqing and Yae, who are able to swap off field and be more quick swap-esque. Granted, Clorinde has very fast rotation, so consider this a big nitpick, but I will say that Keq W and Yae have the advantage of being able to swap off onto official if they need to reposition alls for any particular reason, and if buffs start to run out, they have a much easier time immediately refreshing said buffs. Whereas if you run out of buffing during Clorinde's uptime, well, sucks to be you, as either you swap off and lose DPS to refresh said buffs, or just lose DPS of unbuffed attacks. And while Clorinde's best in slot team is good anywhere and everywhere, that does make adapting her to specific scenarios a bit more difficult. Okay, consider this next one a nitpicky con, because I genuinely don't think not being able to one-rotate bosses is that big of a deal. You'll be able to clear 36 stars fine, even if you can't do this. But for anybody in the audience who may be a speedrunner or a whale, know that she's a bit harder to one-rotate with because her DPR is very low. And for those of you in the audience who don't know what DPR means, it means damage per rotation. So if you want Clorinde to carry her own weight in a mega fast clear, then you'll need to dump a crap ton of resources into her. For the general player base out there, trust me, this does not matter at all, and you can simply ignore Viscon. Clorinde is looking to be the brand new premier Aggravate DPS, with a ton of utility to her name and a lightning fast kit. Like seriously, her burst animation is crazy cool. If you're somebody who wants to give Aggravate a go, know that Clorinde will surely be your strongest pick yet. Hopefully this video was able to tell you about Clorox's biggest pros and cons. This has been Juice, signing out, and in an alternate universe, Clorinde would have been a must pull for me.